He suddenly realizes that he must have died in his sleep and went to another world. He honestly admits to Lot that he does not remember anything about himself and his past, and she brings him a mirror. He looks in the mirror and sees that he is now in another body, in the body of a boy named Pharma, and on his hand there is a mark in the form of a lightning bolt. Lot tells him that this mark is the symbol of the god of medicine, but Pharma has no idea what she is talking about and ignores her. She explains that their family were the royal pharmacists for many generations and were almost as important as the king before then to take him to the hall and show photos of his parents. She also says that his family is incredibly skillful, and this is impressive for the Pharma, and he asks if he can also do magic. This terrifies her and she asks him if he remembers anything about magic. He shakes his head and she says that the main trait of an aristocrat is the ability to do magic, and without it people will consider him commoners. She explains that he used to be a water magician and was very good at this art and asks him to try to remember how to do magic. He returns to his room and sits on the bed, wondering where to start. But then he remembers the chemical composition of water and thinking about the molecular structure. Suddenly he feels something moving and water begins to flow from his hands. He quickly runs to the window and trying to stop the flow, splashes a lot of water into the garden. Finally he manages to stop the flow and he is very tired by the end of this process. The Lot, who was in the garden, is glad that he remember how to use magic and hurries upstairs. At that time he is trying to imagine the various molecular compounds and discover what can create complex substances. She knows their molecular structure. She goes upstairs and asks Ken if he has forgotten all his medical knowledge and takes him to the library. The library was huge, with a huge collection of books, and she tells him that he read them all, remembering every word. He takes the book and although he has never seen it before, he realizes that everything in it is already in his head because some of the boy's memories are still with him. After that he goes to dinner where his family is worried about his feelings. Sitting at the table a serious man who turns out to be his father. His father is glad that he is better but begins to ask him medical questions to check if his memory is okay. His mother tries to reassure his father, but Pharma tells her that everything is fine and answers correctly. It seems the father is happy with his answers and says that from tomorrow he will start doing magic again, and Pharma immediately agrees. The next day he goes downstairs and meets his teacher named Helen. She looks at him with suspicion and says that he is not like the farmer she knew. She knows that he has memory problems and says that now she is his teacher and mentor. Then she asks if he remembers magic and he answers that he doesn't remember. She says that today they will have a repetition of what they have learned and explains to him that there are several elements including fire, water, air and earth, and with their help you can create a lot of new things. She takes him to the river and asks Sin if he took his magic wand. He asks not about Tuli, what is in his pants, but she says that she doesn't like wands below average because she likes big ones. He takes out a huge wand and suddenly remembers what he saw the same one in his room on the wall, but thought it was just decoration. She sighs and takes out her own wand, which is quite large, and I think it's from Thailand, but let's not assume anything. She hands him her huge wand and says that he should use it to cast a simple spell with a fountain. He seems confused and says he doesn't remember how to do it. Then she takes the wand from him and goes to the shore, saying that now she will show. She just goes to the shore and creates a fountain with her wands, which makes him very impressed. He will be very impressed when I create several fountains without water at night. Then she comes up to him and hands him a wand, saying that he should repeat it without even explaining how she did it. Anyway, Pharma is a cool guy and he comes to the shore as a result, creating a fountain that can compete with my night fountains, and this shocks her to the core and she falls. She runs up to him to check if everything is okay with him and says that Ka person has a certain amount of mana which he can use, and she is afraid that he used all his mana. She runs back, takes out a small wand from her bag and tells him to squeeze it tightly. It seems he is very experienced in handling wands, and it turns out that it was some kind of mana meter and the wand breaks, which she is very shocked. She tells him that this has never happened before in their world and lifts his sleeve to look at the tattoo that God made on his arm and is again surprised to see that it is glowing. The farmer brushes it off, but she tells him that it's not just a random mark, it's the mark of the medicine god gang. She tells him that he should never brag to anyone, even to his father, and they end up stopping classes for today. On the way back they sit on a bench, and while they are chatting he realizes that he can see if someone has a health problem if he concentrates, he notices that Ellen's stinger turned blue when he concentrated, and she says that he is right because she hurt him this morning. But this scares her even more, and she says that this is the gift of the god of medicine and asks him not to kill her before running into the bushes. What a crazy thought. The next day, he wakes up and his father calls him to tell him that Ellen has a high fever and she will no longer teach him what is very strange. He also gives him a bunch of medicines and a short note asking him to give them to her to say hi. He goes to Ellen's mansion, which is also incredibly large, and waits in the room remembering how she was scared yesterday. Suddenly, the main door of the hall opens, and Ellen appears in full battle dress looking very frightened. She asks him not to kill her and stands at the door while he tries to calm her down and shows that he doesn't even have a magic wand, which calms her down a little. She takes off her mask but is still on guard and asks why he came, and he explains that his father sent him to bring her medicine. She goes inside but again starts to worry, thinking that the pharmacists could have mixed poison into the medicine. He assures her that he didn't do anything like that. Then he hands her the medicine that he himself created, and using modern scientific knowledge and the ointment that also needs to be applied. This is hers. Also worries, but he assures her that he is not going to harm her and wants her to become his teacher. She says that he doesn't even need to study because he himself is the reincarnation of the god of medicine, but he insists that he wants her to become his teacher. She bows and says that if this is the will of God, then she will obey. He honestly admits that he knows nothing about magic in this world and does not consider himself God. He asks her to help because in the library there are no materials about magic, there are only books on medicine. He says that wants to learn how to use and control his new magical abilities, and she agrees to teach him. Before leaving, he hands her a bouquet of flowers and says that if she does not become his teacher, then he will take the flowers back. The next day, while walking in the garden, he meets Ellen, who is back in armor but looks more relaxed. She tells him that his magic is too strong and she needs to be careful until she is sure that he can handle it. She thanks him for the medicine and says that even his father's medicine never works so quickly. His medicine is similar to a miracle. She also says that she decided to train him and explains that they will go to the abandoned island because if something goes wrong it will not harm anyone on the isle, and they spend the whole day training, learning new spells and mixing different elements. She says that he learns surprisingly quickly and will soon master these spells before returning to the mainland. After that, he sits on the stairs like a real pervert and watches the servants taking notes. He continues to use his magic eye, recording all the illnesses of the servants and what this ability can and cannot do. Finally, after examining all the servants, he notices that Lot also has problems with the skin on his hands. Scabs appear on his hands. He goes to his room and creates a medicine for Lot's hands. Using his modern knowledge in medicine, he creates a whole series of modern medicines to make a great modern medicine. He then gives it to Lot, saying that this medicine should cure her hands. She is very happy and asks she can share it with the other servants. He says that there is no need to worry because he created different medicines by studying the symptoms of people. He goes with her to distribute the medicine to the servants, and they are all very happy. Lot explains that none of them had ever received medicine from a noble before because there is a big gap between the nobles and the peasants. The nobles often do not pay attention to the peasants, and if they do, the treatment fee is to hide. This thought upsets him, and he decides to make the medicine available to the common people. The next day, in the morning, his father calls him, and he goes to the dining room where the parents look very gloomy. They explain that his sister got chickenpox and within 3 weeks no one can enter her room. Some servants are exceptions since for years ago Farmo was sick with chickenpox. Realizing the situation, he returns to his room. He begins to think about the chemical composition of the medicines that he needs to prepare. He is not sure that he can create such a complex medicine, but after countless attempts he succeeds. He sneaks into his sister's room although he is not supposed to be there. Blank is surprised at how quickly she recovered. The next day, he visits his sister while her father is impressed with her quick recovery. In the evening, he working on creating a simple microscope. His father calls him and says that he is being called to the royal capital. He looks very worried and coughs, trying to hide it. Pharma suspects that his father also has problems with his lungs, but hopes that he has enough medical knowledge to deal with it on his own. His father tells him that he was called to the palace by order of the queen, and he cannot yet tell him the details, but wants him to be there as an assistant to learn how to solve problems and learn more about other nobles. They both get into the carriage and after a while they arrive in the royal capital, which seems to be teeming with people. They head straight to the palace, where they meet a guy with long hair who greets them and leads them into a huge hall full of people who look worried. The father asks in what condition. Now the queen, to which the guy with long hair replies that her condition cannot be treated. They approach the queen's bed and bow, after which the queen opens her eyes and it is clear that one of her legs is already in the coffin. The father approaches the queen and checks her pulse, then asks the pharmacist to bring it. After which he takes the queen's blood for analysis and conducts some magical research. Then they go to the window and look at the queen's horoscope to understand whether she will live or die. Wow, what an amazing doctor! They look at the stars, shake their heads, realizing that the stars are not aligned, and discuss that there is no way to save the queen and that she will die. Tomorrow the father comes up to the queen again and asks to bring some medicine from his bag, and the farmer understands that he is laughing, so that the queen took the draught so that she could be happy for the last time before her death. The queen directly asks if she will live, and he replies that the medicine is very strong and should help, and gives the queen a puff from the ancient bomb. Farmer turns around after hearing the courtiers discussing how the funeral will be held and understands that this is just a big ritual for euthanasia and his father is just trying to make Leva's path to death easier. Farmer becomes uneasy and he decides that he must do something and uses his ability to find out what exactly is bothering him. The queen then finds out that she has problems with her lungs. Perhaps it is cancer or tuberculosis. After carefully studying the symptoms, he understands that he is sleeping and at that time this disease was incurable. But with the help of the medicine of the future, he will be able to cure her. Suddenly the door opens and a little boy runs into the room and, crying, approaches the queen, saying that he does not want her to die and asks her never to leave him. She looks very sad, and then farmer decides that he cannot let her die. He approaches her and bowing asks for permission to cure her with her new medicine that he invented. All the courtiers immediately gasp, and his father comes up to him and asks what kind of nonsense he is talking about. Farmer insists that he can cure the queen, and his father scolds him for not understanding what he is dealing with, but the queen stops him, saying that he will let the farm try because he is the only one who is not trying to drug her for years, and runs out of the courtroom, locks herself in the room and jams the door with her ice magic. He begins getting his things out of his bag when his father arrives and starts banging on the door, order him to open it this very minute, but he tries to concentrate. He begins to think about the compound he will need to create a medicine. It would be very difficult, so he draws the chemical nature of the compound before imagining it and synthesizing it. However, before he can do this, his father bursts through the door with his own magic and tells him to stop this stupidity. He tells the pharmaceutical company that the disease is incurable and he is just going to create more problems and pain to the queen. The pharmaceutical company replies that the disease is incurable and that his father is just stupid because he believes in astrology like every other stupid girl I know. Then he turns around and begins to synthesize his medicine, but his father is offended by his dislike of astrology, as well as everyone else stupid girl, and tells him that this is also real science before shooting an ice blast at him. Pharma turns around, and by this time his father is already raising his magic wand as well every morning and asks him to answer what miracle cure is he talking about without knowing that the medicine is just poison. Pharma tells his dad to put away his magic wand, but like my creepy uncle, he refuses and again launches ice blasts at him. Farah turns around and quickly creates a magical barrier to repel the attack, which shocks his father, who asks why is because his son does not know how to use magic without a magic wand, and spales Farah does not know how to explain to his father that he has found himself in another world. But the father finds his diary, which is full of notes about chemical trade, replies that when he was in a coma, he had a dream and he suddenly understood everything about medicine and the Kama Sutra. The father asks if this was a revelation from the god of medicine, but Farah honestly replies that he has no idea. The father says that if it really was a revelation from God himself, then he can't do anything. He puts the magic wand in its sheath. Unlike my creepy uncle, Farah also shows respect and removes the wall, which again shocks the father because he thought that element headlights water. He again begins to prepare the medicine and, after finishing, puts on a mask and goes to the courtroom. He approaches the queen and says that the medicine is ready, that the disease from which she suffers is called sleeping, and this is because the queen is a strange animal and the treatment will be long because she will have to take it every day for 6 months. but before giving her the medicine he approaches her and shows the bacteria in her blood under a large microscope and explains to her what it is. Then he drinks one of the glasses to show that he is not trying to poison her, and the queen drinks the second glass herself. All the nobles gather around to look through the microscope and are amazed at what they see, asking what kind of magic this is. He then returns to his mansion and gives his father a bottle of alcohol and some drugs to have fun with the Kama Sutra. It has been 3 months since they treated the queen of this kingdom, and his father came up with the custom of comparing their notes on the Kama Sutra every morning and deciding if they want to try something new. He is surprised that Farm knows so many different paws and can only take it as a blessing from the gods. His father also tells him that recently people from the medical college came to him and wanted him to tell them how to create these drugs, but Farm immediately refused, saying that only he can create the blue meat vitamin. His father tells him that he has nothing to worry about because he told the people from the medical college that they will never be able to create these drugs, and he wants to monopolize the market by selling them. And being the only manufacturer, Pharma looks at his father and tells him what he really wants: to make public the recipe for this medicine so that it can be bought in any pharmacy. But the problem is that he uses his special abilities to create these medicines. The father becomes serious and tells him that now he is in the eyes of many people, not only from the pharmaceutical industry, but also from the sex industry, who hates the queen, and he needs to be very careful. He says that he suspects that someone has deliberately spread sleeping in the palace, that is, the queen slept with the enemy, which is very the harem that at first he sleeps does not manifest itself in any way, and the one who infected the queen most likely does not know about it. The father is surprised and asks if Pharma has read a lecture on AIDS, but Pharma replies that he uses the knowledge from the Kama Sutra in practice, unlike his loser father, and adds that he is going to pat the queen on the cheeks and will return later. He comes to the palace and, waiting at the door of the queen's chambers, he meets a young guy who witnessed the queen's unsuccessful abortion, and he asks what Pharma wants from the queen. Pharma seems confused, but the guy says that he cured the queen, and of course she should reward him. Pharma says that he doesn't want anything if they didn't talk about his passion. Then he would only like to open a pharmacy and sell as many drugs as he needs. The door opens and he enters the room to do the usual examination of the queen. He writes down all the new symptoms and changes the dosage before saying that it seems she is getting better and in a couple of months she will be completely fine. The queen laughs and says that she can't wait to have sex again, but Pharma stops her, saying that she needs to abstain for at least a couple of months, otherwise the disease may return to the last stage. The queen seems surprised by this news, but promises that she will try to restrain herself. The queen begins to say that since she got AIDS, her social status has dropped greatly and no one respects her anymore. Pharma says that this is what you get when you behave frivolously, but then consoles her by saying that no matter what others say, she will always be needed by her son, who will always respect her. This is the biggest lie which I have ever heard. He also says that many Sims adore her and will worship her until her death. This makes the queen happy and she lets Pharma go so that he can calmly go about his business. The next day he and his father are called to the royal palace and they both look gorgeous. They enter the palace and sees a huge crowd of nobles and the queen is sitting on the throne. She calls Pharma's father and starts talking some nonsense, thanks him for his help in difficult times, and then shouts from the crowd, who he seems very surprised. He timidly approaches the queen. She places her staff on his shoulders and praises him for his excellent service and saving her life, and then gives him a badge and makes him a royal apothecary like his father. Then she tells him that she gives him permission to open a pharmacy in the royal city where he wants and when he wants in the land he chooses, and makes him happy with this news. The next day a crowd of people comes to his house asking for an audience, and when he meets them they explain that they are royal raft builders and masons whom the queen personally appointed to build the pharmacy as quickly and beautifully as possible. Pharma replies that he has no special wishes about where and when he wants to open a pharmacy and he needs time to decide. But the workers explain that they cannot allow this because if they return to the palace without a pharmacy, the queen will order their heads to be cut off before he can say anything. Ellen enters the room and says that her father ordered her to help him in building the pharmacy. Pharma says that wants to go to other pharmacies to understand what he needs, but the workers immediately answer that this is impossible because the queen will literally make it so that his whole family will never see the sun again. After thinking a little, Pharma finally decides what he needs, takes a pencil and a piece of paper and begins to draw the ideal pharmacy of his dreams. After a while, construction is in full swing and the contractor asks what he wants to call his pharmacy. Pharma thinks and decides to call it a pharmacy of a parallel world. He approaches Ellen and asks whether it will be too pretentious because he wants to everything was quiet and without unnecessary press. But she replies that the son of an aristocrat opening a pharmacy is a sensation and the press will definitely be interested in whether he wants it or not. But before they can say anything, the fat man comes up to them and says that he heard about it and looks at their store. He looks at the pharmacy and asks to call the owner of the store. And Farmer replies that he is the owner and every evening he comes to his mother. The fat man says that he is from the Guild of Pharmacists and asks if Pharma wants to sell candies for children or caramel because he is still too young for anything else. The farmer replies that the fat man's mother really likes his candies and she is his only customer. For the others, he is going to sell real medicine. He asks the fat man if he needs to register with the guild to open a store, but the fat man replies that their guild does not accept nobles, but if he begs him then maybe he will let him join. The pharmacist refuses, saying that he wants to work on his own and believes that he can sell the medicine better than the whole guild. Fat man and at lower prices it on Jay the fat man, who says that it is impossible, but Ellen stops him, telling him not to interfere otherwise she will go crazy and make a roast out of him, which scares the fat man and he just runs away. The pharmacist comes into his store and checks the tools that he has and tells Ellen that they need someone who will do the bookkeeping and handle the money. Lot offers herself because she can read, write, and loves math. Wow, what a monster! But the pharmacist doesn't want to give her a chance because he is a misogynist and says that he will make her his assistant because obviously the girl cannot understand such things like money. This is not for her. The simple-minded Lot quickly agrees and leaves. Then he turns to Ellen again and says that they need to find someone who will do their accounting perfectly. At evening he returns home and sees that all the servants, his sister and many others are crying in the hall. He comes in and asks what is the matter, and the man named Cedric replies that he thanks him for his generosity all these years and that from today he is resigning from the position of chief accountant on the farm and perhaps he will live peacefully somewhere in the village. That is why everyone is so upset. He says that his knees hurt very much and given that Pharma's father decided to fire him, Pharma asks if he would like to work if his knees didn't hurt and Cedric nods, saying that he likes to do accounting. After hearing this, Pharma runs away and goes into his father's office to ask permission to hire Cedric as an accountant in his pharmacy. Father says that he fired Cedric so that Pharma could hire him and orders a servant to bring a huge chest which he gives to Pharaoh in honor of the opening of the pharmacy. Pharma opens the chest and sees that it is full of gold coins. I hate these children from rich families. He tells Forum to manage his money carefully and make his pharmacy prosper, which, to be honest, is not so difficult when you have unlimited funds. A month has passed since the pharmacy opened, but strangely enough, in a couple of weeks there is rarely more than one customer and the business is going badly, which is why Pharma loses self-confidence. But Helen reassures him by saying that this is inevitable, because commoners usually turn to pharmacists and doctors who are also from the common people and that they did this. And nobles and aristocrats simply call a pharmacist to their home to cure them of any illness. He sighs heavily, not understanding why people don't want to go to the new pharmacy at least once. But then Lotta enters the room with a kiosk and papers in her hands and says that she went around the whole city and conducted a survey among ordinary people about their attitude towards the new pharmacy and she finally has the results. She begins to list the problems that people named and the first of them is the imperial seal on the door, which means that the pharmacy obeys only the Koro and this is usually for very high-ranking nobles. The second problem is the security that looks intimidating and stands at the entrance to the pharmacy to protect the store but scares off the common people with its cold attitude. What do they want? These people are there to look after the store Teletubbies. Next, the problem is that they don't know how to behave in such a luxurious store, and this is the strangest thing I've heard in a long time. Next, the problem is that they are afraid of misbehaving in front of a nobleman. Another problem is that people think that the prices of medicines will be very high although they are cheaper than their competitors, and the main problem is that they do not trust the owners of children, and to be honest, this is quite fair. They decide to discuss these problems later, and fortunately on this day, one customer comes in who turns out to be an old sailor and he needs anti-nausea pills. He receives pills, drinks water and is about to leave, promising to return. The pharmacist stops him and gives him pills with vitamin C, claiming that sailors are very susceptible to gonorrhea and these pills will help him protect himself from this problem. The old man, however, seems surprised and refuses the pills and then says that they are waiting for him outside. The pharmacist follows him and sees that the old man is talking very quietly with two other men in suits, but does not have time to find out anything because he is intercepted by mom and dad who wear masks that I often saw on one site. He takes them to the store and asks them to leave his fetishes at home. But dad just tells him to shut up and asks him to show them Gason. The pharmacist takes them to different floors of the store, first showing them the main floor, where he will sell medicine. The second floor is a room for patients to relax. There are even isolation rooms for crazy people like me. After that he shows them the bathroom in the kitchen and leads them to his personal laboratory, where he develops new methods for creating cream. After the tour, they sit on the sofa and he explains that there are few clients coming and his mother suggests that he start making cosmetics for care, for leather and sell it to nobles and aristocrats, which will increase his popularity among the nobility of ordinary people. He thanks his mother for this great idea, but then his father intervenes and says that there is no need to produce white powder. Pharma is confused, but the father says that he noticed that women who use this white powder, in order to look lighter, get sick more often than those who do not use it. In addition, life expectancy is also reduced if you use this powder. He suddenly understands that his father is talking about heavy metals that previously contained in cosmetics but are now prohibited. Pharma promises the father that he will make better products, but does not have time to say anything when a young man runs into the room and asks if he is the pharmacist because his mistress fainted in the carriage. Pharma runs after him and finds a young noblewoman in the carriage who looks very weak and pale. He immediately uses his skill to understand what the problem is and discovers that there is nothing wrong with her body except for the cuts on her hand. Suddenly, he realizes that the girl must be underwent a bloodletting procedure to look paler and more beautiful. He immediately takes her to his pharmacy and gives her medicine for anemia. She comes to her senses a little and says that she started doing this because her boyfriend left her for a girl with lighter skin. What a racist! After she was dumped, she followed the path of an idiot and began to try different ways instead of going to the gym and becoming like this. He tells her that it is very dangerous and that she should not do this even if the doctors do it, and ask her to come next week because he will have new cosmetics. A week later she returns and he gives her a new foundation and powder without heavy metals that he created and she immediately likes them. The advertisement that he made attracted the attention of many buyers and they began to come to the store for various goods, realizing that the prices for them are low. After a while the girl comes again with a friend, but by this time all the cosmetics have already been sold out and it's very disappointing. They are both sitting in the room, and she offers to invest money in his business and open a branch of his company that will deal only with cosmetics. Agrees because his accountant gives him the green light. After a while another store and laboratory opens, where they test and create cosmetics. The woman even has several reliable female pharmacists who specialize in cosmetics and work in the pharmacy, increasing the supply of these goods. The rumor about a new makeup product reached the queen, who called Pharma and asked about his business. Pharma gave her lip gloss, which was a new product here. She applied it to her lips and was fascinated by how beautiful it began to look. But Pharma advised her to be careful because she didn't want to catch any disease again. She said that from now on she wanted to be the first to buy these cosmetics and asked Pharma to raise the prices for his products. Otherwise, the local businessman would go bankrupt. Pharma agreed. After a while, Pharma went on a sea voyage to meet a lord named Adam, who once cured the queen and received the title of lord. Now he has the largest port and drug production in the entire kingdom, which made him very rich. During a conversation with his father, Adam mentioned that they were having problems with one of the companies. I was trying to find a way not to pay taxes. His father calmly looked at him and said that he needed to try to solve the problem before it went too far. He made an appointment with Adam to discuss this problem. Suddenly he turned to Pharma and said that he should go play instead of having useless adult conversations. Pharma realized that he needed to act like a child, then started chatting like an idiot, saying that at first he swims in the sea and then runs away. He went down to the beach and saw Lot and his little sister who were building sandcastles. The girls both come up to him and begin to ask him to let them play in the water, but he says that they don't know how to swim and he doesn't know how. But then Ellen runs up and starts begging him to let her play in the water, and Lot also asks. Alan finds himself in a very awkward position, and the girls continue to beg him to let them play in the water and promise that they will to stay near the shore. In the end he agrees for them to wet their feet, but says not to let them get wet. He turns around and sees that Ellen has appeared out of nowhere like a letharg and drinks wine, and then says that she also wants to swim and even invites Pharma to help her. Pharma politely refuses, and Alan asks if she can swim before she goes into the ocean. He and remembers that he used to swim well, and a memory pops up in him of how his sister asked him to let her play with him water, but she was too small, and he always told her that now she couldn't go into the water, but he promised that he would take her with him to the ocean when she turned 5 years old. But this never happened because a tragedy happened and she left this world before she was 5 years old. Dan never had time to enjoy the beautiful ocean waves. He comes to his senses and quickly wipes away his tears, but immediately shudders when he hears a loud scream. He sees that Blaine is drowning, and Ellen screams call for help. Blaine cannot swim to the shore, and Pharma rushes into the water, and Ellen screams at him to stop because he too could get hurt, but Pharma does not listen and swims to Blaine. Well, Ellen cannot cope with the strong current. He swims, but he understands that a huge wave knocks her off her feet, and he also dives to save his sister and remembers her real sister, promising that he will not let Blaine suffer. He understands that he will not have time to swim to her, and screams in despair, and suddenly his tattoo with the gang symbol begins to glow, and the water in the entire area disappears, leaving Blaine at the bottom, and Pharma watches in amazement as fish swim around. Ellen stands up in confusion and looks around. Pharma stands holding Blaine in her arms and looks like Moses stopping the water. He saves them from danger. Blaine cries in his arms from, and Ellen sits in complete shock. Pharma calms Blaine and checks if she is hurt, but is relieved to see that she's okay. Ellen can't understand what happened and asks what he did. Pharma honestly admits that he has no idea how it happened and that it was possibly one of his abilities related to water, but Ellen replies that such magic does not exist. Pharma is shocked by this and notices that even Lot seems afraid of him now, but he's just glad that he was able to save his sister from certain death in this life, and hugs her tightly. Later at night, he sits on the bed and thinks about the fact that he just removed all the water from the environment without even thinking that their bodies are also made of water and that a small mistake could cost them their lives. Loth puts him to bed and is about to leave the room, but Pharma stops her and apologizes, saying that she doesn't need to worry because he won't use this magic anymore. Loth seems confused when Pharma says that she knows that she was scared when he used this magic, but she immediately replies that she wasn't scared. On the contrary, she was in awe of his magical abilities and was amazed by his quick thinking and the decisions he made that saved Blaine's life. She cries because whenever she drowned, she couldn't move and just stood frozen in fear. Pharma tells her that she did the right thing by not getting into the water because she also doesn't know how to swim, and says that she is as important to him as his sister. Lot can't contain his joy and thanks him from the bottom of his heart before going to his room for the night. The next morning they open their pharmacy and see a crowd of people gathered in front of the entrance. Pharma is shocked by so many customers because usually they have half as many customers. He thinks that this is possible because they closed for the weekend, but Ellen claims that it is because Pharma has excellent medicine. Looking around, Pharma notices two men in white clothes who look at him like he's some kind of damn lecher. He walks up to them and asks if they need help, but they don't answer and immediately leave. Later that day, they sit down for tea and Pharma starts talking about guys in white clothes, and Ellen claims that even she tried to help them, but they only looked at Pharma, and Lot says that she asked if she could help them, but they didn't even answer. Ellen says that their clothes are not like the locals because she knows all the guilds in the area, which makes their appearance even more suspicious. Lot gets a little scared and asks if they should contact the guards, and Pharma agrees. The next morning, when the guards open the doors of the pharmacy, they saw that a carriage was driving up to them. He tries to stop the horse, but it just rushes through the gate, destroying everything in its path. After that, the guard comes to Pharma's mansion and tells everything to his father, who is outraged by this. He asks the guard what the hell is he doing, but the guard simply apologizes, saying that he didn't even have time to react. Pharma realizes that this is real, a daring act of the enemy, and his father declares that he himself will punish the culprit. The advisor asks "Why would anyone do such a thing?" And the father replies that the enemies want to close the farmer's store because they consider him an outsider selling explosives at very low prices. He tells the guard to be on the alert because he expects new problems, and he promises to write to the queen about this incident. The farmer tells the father that he will also go to the pharmacy, but the father stops him and asks if he has any suspicions. He knows that it could do both members of the Guild of Pharmacists and people in white cloaks, but to be sure he says that he needs time to collect more information. Farmer runs to the pharmacy and sees that it is completely destroyed, and the people are PTA_farmer asks what happened, and one of his workers shows that the store is completely destroyed. Before farmer can go inside, the man quickly uses cleansing magic to remove the smell. Farmer inspects the store and sees that the pharmacy department was not damaged, which means he can make more medicine if he wants, and the man says that Ellen and the lot took as many medicines as they could to the mansion so that people who urgently need them could get them. While Pharma examines the surrounding area, he meets Jean, an old man whom he once helped, and tells him that he is here to help. All the other locals seem to love Pharma and tell him how worried they are about him, that they promise to help him with the store. They begin cleaning and Pharma watches them with admiration. Suddenly a woman runs into the store and asks to call a doctor. Pharma immediately approaches her and she begins to cry, explaining that her father suddenly fell to the ground due to the heat and cannot get up. He immediately gets on the horse with the girl and rides after her while she explains where her father is. He continues to ride, thinking about the possible causes of her father's illness and worrying about whether he has enough medicine. The girl tells him to ride past the hill. This makes him suspicious because he does not understand why her father was in such a remote place. They are riding through a meadow, but when he turns around to ask her a question, she disappears, and instead he is surrounded by people in white hooded on horses. One of them points a wand at him and asks if it is true that he removed part of the ocean near the beach. Pharma is in shock, and the man says that he is an investigator from the kingdom and demands an answer. Suddenly, he remembers how Ellen told him about the temple of the sacred organization of this world. According to her, the temple has enormous power since it is they who determine the status of the nobility by assessing their magical power. She tells him that the temple is almost as powerful as the queen in their eyes. Dukes and other nobles means nothing. Then she talks about the temple investigators who are known to be ruthless when they find or someone who doesn't believe in there, because they are known for wiping such people from the face of the earth. Using their extraordinary magical abilities, he returns to reality, where the leader of the group introduces himself, Sal, and directly asks him why he doesn't have a shadow. Sal calls him stupid because he went out in broad daylight when his shadow is not visible. He calls Pharma a man and not an evil spirit without a shadow. Pharma shouts that he is not an evil spirit or a phantom, but one of the men interrupts him and asks who he is. Pharma honestly replies that as far as he knows he is a human, but Sal is not in the mood to listen and says that they don't need excuses. Sal orders him to raise his hands to move 10 steps away, and in order not to make the situation worse, Pharma obeys and retreats. Then Sal uses his magic to enclose Pharma in a magic dome. To their surprise, the dome is completely destroyed, which scares them, and they start running around him, and one of them uses flame magic to attack Pharma. He immediately creates a fire shield around himself and then simply sucks the oxygen out of the air to put out the flames. The investigators believe that Pharma has fire magic, so the other guy uses ice magic. But Pharma immediately creates another shield that destroys ice magic, which simply amazes them. After all, they have never seen that someone with several attributes can use magic without a magic wand. The investigators are shocked and sat down and tells them that there is no need to try to take him alive, and just killing him scares Pharma, and the men attack him at the same time with earth magics, water, wind, and fire. All the attacks combine and hit Pharma, and the investigators wait until the dust settles to see how he ends up in an ice cage. Pharma decides that this is not enough and is forced to use his attack magic. He creates a powerful flash that knocks the village down, and while his friends are trying to help him get up, they notice that Pharma is coming towards them. Levitate sank the Titanic. He tells them that he can easily get rid of them with one blow, that he was born in this world to heal people and not harm them. His glowing body shocks the Solo, who finally notices the gang tattoo on his arms and tells his friends that he was mistaken and this guy is not a man but the god of medicine himself. This shocks Pharma, who tries to explain to them that there is nothing like that, but they all lower their heads, and Saul declares that he received punishment for raising his wand to God himself, and Pharma notices that when Saul fell he broke his leg, and it is bleeding. Saul begins to times drama and tells everyone that he will soon die from this wound and asks Pharma for forgiveness, and then takes out a small dagger from his belt and puts it to his throat. Luckily Pharma manages to stop the knife before it plunges into the throat and uses his magic to remove his style. Looks confused, and Pharma tells him that he does not want anyone to die and that he only wants to work calmly in his pharmacy. He moves away and with the help of his knowledge examines the open fracture and Steele's leg, and he is trying to figure out how to stop the bleeding. He is thinking about amputation, but he sees that his leg is glowing, which means he will die. From amputation he realizes that he will have to have surgery to save his life, but the problem is that they are so far from the city that it may be too late for him. He knows that he is a pharmacist who does not do surgery, but if Steele does not get immediate medical attention, he will not survive. He immediately turns and uses his earth magic to create a magic table and then tells his friends to put Steele on it and tells them to call the carriage. Steele is shocked because he is ready to treat him, but Pharma tells him not to worry about it. By the time Eva arrives he posts solo in the tent and finally goes in there himself, explaining to Saul that he will need to be given antibiotics to relieve the pain, and then he will clean the wound before cutting out the damaged tissue and putting stitches. He puts on a surgical suit, takes a syringe and injects Saul with anesthesia, and he puts ice on Solo's back and asks if he feels anything. Saul replies that he doesn't feel anything, and Pharma sighs with relief. He takes a scalpel and gets to work. A few hours later he leaves the tent where Saul's friends are eagerly awaiting news. Pharma reports to them that the operation was successful and their commander will all live. They are delighted, not believing their ears, because Pharma not only did not punish them, but also helped. Pharma tells them to relax and orders them to keep what happened a secret, because he does not want everyone to know about his abilities. A few months later, Saul himself comes to the Pharma pharmacy at Ellen and Lodo are rooting because he is the main bishop and investigator of the temple, but he tells them that he owes him his life and gives them a box of chocolates. He thanks Pharma again, saying that he can walk only thanks to him and will always be devoted to him. He claims that he has completely deleted the files about the suspicious boy who has no shadow, so he doesn't have to worry about further problems in this direction. Pharma thanks him for his help and looks out the window to look at his flashlight that he'd brought with a bunch of gifts. Pharma thinks that it's to sat down, asks to talk in private, and shows him a box in which lies a magic wand, which, according to legend, belonged to the god of medicine. It was kept in the treasury of the temple along with the statue of the god, but the SLL decided that the wand must be with its rightful owner, so he brought it here. He claims that this wand can use all its properties and also be ready for datal diagnosis and healing. Pharma is in shock and Ellen is drooling at the sight of such a big and thick wand that can satisfy her. Pharma seems to doubt that he can pick up a national treasure because he is afraid that it will break or it will be stolen. Sal tells him to just take the wand, and when he does it starts to glow brightly, and SLL and Ellen claim that the wand has recognized the Pharma as its rightful owner. Ellen drools from all the orifices on her body and asks if she can also hold his big fat wand, and Pharma agrees, but the wand just slips out of her hands and falls to the floor. They turn to the village, who claims that this wand belongs to God, so no person can take it or use it except its rightful owner. Pharma takes it again and tries to sit on it as Purcell ordered, and to her surprise, she begins to float in the air with him. Finally, SL leaves with his people and tells the format that the temple will no longer cause him problems, but advises him to be careful because last time the temple did not attack his pharmacy with the help of that same wagon, which means someone else is hunting for him. Pharma honestly replies that he has no idea who it could be, but would like to find out as soon as possible before leaving. He is surprised to see his shadow on the floor and is very happy because he finally feels like an ordinary person. Later that day he spends time with his sister and Lot and goes with them to the market to buy fruits. But he seems tired after such hard work because the number of clients has increased sharply and he needs new employees. He thinks about people he can trust and notices a young woman who is trying to find the right medicine in the pharmacy, but he is not there. The owner of the pharmacy tells the woman that although the medicines that Pharma sells are effective, the guild does not approve of them, which means the usual ones pharmacies are not allowed to sell them. Later in the evening, Pharma returns to the pharmacy and tells Ellen about her plans to create a new guild. She checks if they meet the requirements and says that they can legally found a guild if they want, and she believes that as soon as the guild is ready, new stores will definitely join it to make money on new drugs, which will significantly reduce their workload. It was quickly decided that the guild will be created, and Pharma suggested that Cedric prepare the documents the next morning. On the way to the pharmacy, he met a ragged man who carried his daughter on his back and knocked on the doors of the local doctor. Pharma told him that the doctor was out of town for a few days, but if he wants, Pharma can examine his daughter. The man looked at Pharma, suspiciously noticed the royal pharmacist's badge on his collar, and tried to politely say that he had no money. But Pharma said there was nothing to worry about, he would sort it all out before sending Lottie. He told the man to follow him, and they walked through the main gate to his pharmacy, which was completely filled with people. They entered a clean room. Pharma told the man to put his daughter on a stretcher, and he put on a mask and one to the man who seemed to not know how to use it. Pharma assured him that it was safe and the mask was needed to stop the spread of infection, and the man realized that they had come through the back gate so that his sister's illness would not spread. Pharma sat down at the table and began to ask about the girl, and the man said that her name was Marie. She was 7 years old. Then Pharma asked when she got sick, and the man replied that she last ate in the afternoon from since then. And well, Pharma tells him that the girl seems to be dehydrated and is now in a semi-conscious state, which means she has a high temperature. Then he asks the man if he knows Marie's weight, but he doesn't know. So Pharma asks him to stand on the scales, holding Marie in his arms. He writes down the weight while the man looks at him in confusion, and then Pharma says that now he will weigh it separately to find out Marie's weight and will be able to prescribe the correct dosage. Then Pharma examines her body and mouth, and then uses his special magic eye to check if there are any problems, and the man immediately asks if this is divine art, to which Pharma replies that it is. After examination, he turns to his father and reports that Marie has a severe cold, which shocks the man because he was expecting something more serious. He asks if Pharma is sure that this is not possession by spirits, but Pharma by the head. The man says that he does not know of such a cold that causes such a high temperature and even cramps, but Pharma replies that it is a special form of cold called the flu. The man says nothing about it, doesn't know this, but Pharma says that this is happening because of the virus and reassures him that everything will be fine. He takes out a bag and tells the man to give his daughter the powder twice a day. The man fearfully asks what kind of powder it is, and Pharma answers. Then he tells the gorilla that he will teach her to sniff the powder, and tells the father that the fever is caused by the fat at the leukocytes in Marie's body fight the virus, and this is good because the virus dies at a high temperature. Then he puts Marie on the bed and tells the father that there is no need to worry because she will get better soon, and leaves, promising to come back later that night. Pharma lets the girl go because she is already strong enough to return home. Man gives her father some medicine and then says that although the store is closed, he can go to the guards and tell about his problem. The man is surprised and asks if Pharma wants to examine Marie night if something happens, and Pharma replies that he is ready because this way he can help more people. Then the man goes to the main point and asks how much does he owe Pharma, and promises that although he doesn't have that much money now, he will pay gradually even with interest. Pharma says he doesn't need to worry because the fee is equal to the cost of a piece of bread, and it shocks the man, but Pharma says that poor people won't be afraid to bring their children for checkups even with minor problems. It turns out the man's name is Pierre and he's a pharmacist himself, but he didn't have the right medicine or knowledge to cure a disease he knew nothing about. He sits down and tries to find out as much as he can while his wife tells him that he's already helped enough people and he shouldn't worry. The man turns to her with tears in his eyes and says that if she or their daughter got sick, he would not be able to save them because he does not have such deep knowledge as pharmacists, and moreover, he does not have magic. His wife tells him not to tell anyone about the treatment of their daughter because he can be kicked out of the medical guild and his store will be closed. But Pierre says that he will make a choice that he considers necessary. The next day, Pierre and all the other members of the guild are called to a meeting where the head of the guild, Fat Man, talks about the losses they incur because of the pharmacy in the parallel world and claims that his wife bought some cosmetics from them without knowing about it, so he smashed all the bottles into smithereens. The others also complain that their sales have fallen. When Pierre's turn finally comes, he stands up and honestly tells everyone that they will never be able to compete with the pharmacist because he has more knowledge and cares about every person, regardless of their social status. He tells them about his daughter and her treatment, which shocks everyone, and they begin to call him a traitor. The fat man tells him that if they don't find a way to destroy the reputation of pharmacists, then they will have to close the shops, and he will not allow this. Pierre objects by saying that they need to learn from him and then use the same methods and medicines in their practice because they just use herbs that they don't even know whether they work or not, and other men claim that their ancestors also use these herbs so they have to work. The men are outraged and kick him out guilds, and by the time evening comes his shop has already been destroyed and the license has been taken away. He sits on the steps and cries when Pharma accidentally notices him and realizes that Pierre is also a pharmacist. Pierre tells him what happened and says that now he is completely ruined. He will have to move to another country and start all over again in a new guild. Pharma looks at him with sympathy and offers his help, saying that he is opening his own guild and has just received permission from he was late, and asks Pierre to become his first member of the guild. Pierre cannot hold back his tears and shakes his hand, forever remaining indebted to Pharma for saving his life. Time passes and Pierre completely restores his shop and prepares for the opening. He seems nervous, but his daughter gives him strength, and he opens the door and sees that hundreds of customers are already waiting for him. Several months pass, and one day at breakfast his father receives a letter from his older brother Paul, who was supposed to come home for the holidays. His father tells everyone that Paul is not yet comes because of some problems and calls Pharma to his office. Closing the door, he tells Pharma that something terrible happened at his college. He explains that a new disease has broken out there which has already become an epidemic since it has claimed the lives of many people. Pharma is shocked that so many people have already died, and his father says that the researchers from Paula College tried to isolate the samples and conduct a study, but 2 of them died within a week from necrosis, which means that the disease is very contagious. Pharma asks, is it possible to get a sample so that he can also study? But his father says that all the remains and bodies of the dead were burned with a sacred flame. Moreover, the island where the disease broke out was quarantined and the laboratory was completely closed and sealed. Pharma is shocked by what he heard necrosis and asks if there is any other information, and his father says that before burning everything, the students used a microscope, but Pharma made several sketches of the causative agent of the disease. Pharma asks his father to ask Paley for these sketches, and the next day he goes down to the store, is very worried. Ellen notices this and asks what happened, but he replies that there is a big problem. He tells her about the spreading disease and says that in 2 weeks there will be a big holiday in the capital and a cargo will arrive from an already infected area. Before they can discuss anything, a lock comes with a small scroll claiming that it is from the field, and Pharma immediately opens it and realizes that it is a plague, one of the most difficult to cure diseases that has ever existed on Earth. Later that day he meets with his father and tells him that the disease with which they are fighting is called the Black Death or bubonic plague. His father tells him that the last such disease occurred in this world 210 years ago and led to a sharp decline in the population, and Pharma remembers that the plague was on Earth in 1500 and then it killed almost half of the world's population because it is very contagious, as it is transmitted through fleas living on rats, and at the same time the mortality rate is very high. His father claims that they need to intercept the cargo, and Pharma says that he has already sent instructions for preparing quarantine zones. Pharma says that he has already figured out a way to create a cure, but only he can prepare it because it requires divine arts. His father says that the only thing they can do now is to attract the queen for more help, so they go to the palace after meeting and explaining everything to the queen. She quickly understands the situation and states that she will close the city gates and minimize trade, and also allow him to create security checkpoints. A few days later, security checkpoints have been set up, and Pharma meets with Pierre and gives him a newly developed compound microscope that is superior to the previous simple one he created. He warns him about the disease and gives him a supply of medicine before leaving the tent the next morning. Pharma Ellen leaves the city to assess the scale of the problem. Pharma is afraid of facing one of the worst diseases, and Ellen assures him that everything will be fine. They return to the city of Adamo, located near the beach, where he destroyed the ocean, and meet with 2 of their subordinates sent there earlier. His subordinates tell him that everything is in order in the city so far, and sanitary posts are placed everywhere so that not a single infected person goes unnoticed. Pharma thanks them for their cooperation and gets into a small boat to get to the fleet of ships carrying cargo from the infected island. The ships have not been able to dock for several days, and the captains and crew members seem to be very unhappy with this. Pharma enters the first ship, where the captain asks how long will it take for them to finally dock, but Pharma asks him to cooperate while he searches for a doctor on the ship and asks him for the necessary documents and health certificates. Making sure that the documents are in order, he finally goes below deck and begins to examine each crew member for signs of plague and then checks the cargo on board. Finally, he comes to the conclusion that the ship is not infected and gives permission to dock. He then gets back into the boat to go to the next ship when the captain of the other ship starts throwing tomatoes at them. He seems angry that he has to wait on the ship for several days, while the other captain is arguing with him that he needs to be inspected first because he has perishable cargo. They both quarrel and Pharma doesn't know what to do. And suddenly a cannon shot is heard which scares everyone, but when Pharma turns around he sees a royal ship from the capital driven by an old man John who, for some unknown reason, came to his store. He shouts to the other ships to keep decency if they don't want to become a Titanic, and everyone gets scared and obeys his orders. Pharma climbs up to Jean's ship and thanks him for his help and then asks him to stay here and keep an eye on the ship so that no one tries to dock illegally. After that he returns to the tents for inspection and talks to other volunteers, and they all claim that so far there has not been a single case of infection here, which gives them some confidence, but it quickly passes. And Adam, the acting mayor of the region, enters the camp in a hut and states that in a village on the outskirts of his region there were recently fatal cases that seem to have been caused by the fact that yesterday several of the sailors docked illegally with a fever. But then the first person died and the disease began to spread, taking the lives of many people. The pharmacist immediately got ready to leave and Ellen advised him not to go alone. She said that he should check other ships, but Pharma replied that Ellen could also trust the ships, and he needed to solve the problem in the village before something bad happened. He sat on his magic wand. Harry Potter launched him into the sky, but there he lost his balance and almost crashed into a tree. But to his surprise, the wand just went through, without causing any harm to him. Finally, he landed near the village but saw that chaos was reigning there because everyone was going to leave. Believing that spirits had settled in their village, he told them to immediately return and not leave the village. That the residents did not believe him and grabbed their weapons, forced him to show his magic, and he turned the entire village into an igloo. He showed the residents his badge and said that he could cure the disease. But for this they need to return to the village. Seeing that their royal pharmacist is here, they seem to perk up their plan. He wanted to divide the village into 3 zones: for people with severe infection, for people with mild infection, and for healthy ones. He assured them that people with severe infection will be treated first, and this will help prevent the spread of the disease. They all agree to cooperate with him, and the operation begins. The next day Pharma starts work and visits one of the temporary hospitals where there are many patients. He quickly examines them for signs of disease and finds out that some of them are infected, some are dead, and some are just showing the first symptoms. He quickly orders the rest of the volunteers to start distributing the medicine they brought. And he goes to the most infected patients, and with the help of his divine magic, Wuxi, the effect of the medicine is due to which the patients quickly recover. Meanwhile, in the royal capital, his father receives a letter in which Pharma describes a method for creating a vaccine for this disease, and he calls one of the oldest professors named Casper, who specializes in vaccines, but who there was never a chance to prove herself. This time the father shows her the letter that Pharma sent and asks her to find a way to create such a vaccine. To his great surprise, the elderly woman glances at the letter and declares that she has already successfully created something similar 3 years ago. A father silently follows her to the laboratory and is shocked to the core when he sees the vaccine already ready in several vials. He immediately calls everyone and orders to maximize the production of this vaccine and stop any other research that is going on. By the time they fell, Pharma left village to meet with the village elders and said that he tried to cure as many of the infected as possible, and most of them were already on the mend. But there were those whom he could not save. He said that they had avoided the worst scenario, but for now they could relax. He told the elders to make sure that no one left the village for 2 weeks, and if they saw a rodent or a flea, they should immediately kill them so that the activists did not say. He immediately flew away on his magic wand and landed exhausted on the edge of the forest. Noticing the smoke rising from there, he quickly went down and saw that his volunteers had surrounded a group of tied-up sailors and were burning the entire cargo. The sailors said that they had illegally landed on the shore and because of their illness, the captain left them. The sailors seemed to be afraid for their lives, but Pharma promised that if they told him something, he would cure them. The sailors immediately said that they were carrying cargo, but in one of the boxes there were white flying squirrels from the island that the saints themselves were transporting. The Knights of Pharma immediately realized that it was a plan to kill the queen. He realized that even the disease that she had caught earlier was rigged to kill her. Though when Pharma cured her, someone got angry and decided to use the deadliest disease on the planet to kill everyone, including the queen. The next day, in the capital of the kingdom, a group of knights in armor burst into the gates and starts making noise. One of the knights releases a flock of squirrels into the city. The news quickly reaches the queen and she is confused, thinking what is on them. An enemy kingdom attacked, but the scout replies that it was only 5 knights. Suddenly, a farmer's father understands what's going on and tells the queen about his suspicions about a disease that he knows was created by one person. According to him, he had a classmate named Call, who was the same as him, but in principle, they had many differences. One night he wandered through the dungeon and saw how his classmate was conducting experiments on people. He realized that Call did not have a drop of humanity. He immediately told about it the authorities, and the investigators from the temple expelled Call from the medical community. This suggests that before he was expelled, he was studying a special type of poison that can be transmitted from one person to another. In other words, he was trying to create a virus, an epidemic that can affect the lives of people even without physical contact. A fight continues in the city. The knights scatter squirrels everywhere and fight with the royal troops. The royal troops cannot resist the holy knights and are defeated. But suddenly Saul appears with his gang and immediately stops the knights. In the meantime, Pharma finally returns to the city and goes up to the bell tower, but discovers that the infection has already spread. He notices several small dots and realizes that the flying squirrel is still not moving and is spreading the infection everywhere. He sees his father and goes down to him, after which they go together to the main gate, where he sat down and detained the wounded and sick knights. He asks them about their intentions, and the knights answer that they were forced to do it because a madman has taken over their island and threatened to kill the entire population if they don't follow his orders. The farmer's father asks if this man's name is Call, and they immediately agree. But they don't have time to say anything because they are dying of illness on the spot. The farmer's father orders them to be burned, and while they are doing this, Pharma senses something wrong and turns around to see a guy on the roof of the building who looks very dark and ominous. Pharma immediately tells father that he is returning to the pharmacy because he has a bad feeling about the lot. In the meantime, enters the pharmacy with Cedric to take medicine. They go up to the 2nd floor and then Lot turns around and sees that the guy in the hood has stabbed Cedric in the back with a knife from the other side. Pharma and his father get to the pharmacy and he notices that the Dark One is inside the building. They immediately rush inside and see that Lot and Cedric are lying in the corner bleeding, and standing next to them is the dark figure of Pharma's father. Immediately attacks Cal, who is blocking the blows, then turns to show his creepy face. Pharma rushes to his friends and realizes that this is not just an ordinary knife wound because the blood is poison. While his father is fighting with Cal, Pharma tries to find out what kind of poison it is and tries to remove it, but he realizes that there are several types of poison in their bodies and each he begins to treat them in turn. At this time, his father is defeated by a former friend who throws him aside and heads towards Pharma and his friends. He tries to create another deadly poison, but Pharma removes it before hit him in the face with an enhanced spell. They fall from the roof and Pharma hits Cal with his magic wand, causing him to freeze and then thrust it into his chest, causing him to instantly die. Everyone rejoices, and after a while they manage to stop the spread of Black Death and gradually life returns to normal.